him there.
Do you think the bedroll saved the equipment in the box? Maybe? Taking the machine gun?
Yeah. There was always interesting things happened. You know, we were quite fortunate in my group. We lost 2 out of 3 people that were out on a remote transfer station. Our telephones weren't too efficient, and they dropped wire, you know, along, and so we had to have a booster out there halfway between 2 larger areas, and we just put 4 people out there. Well, they had to do their own providing for chow. They had to run the switchboard 24 hours a day, and their own protection. And one time in the middle of the night, we heard a cry from that post, and said, "Get out here quick." Well, we organized a military police group and some heavy equipment to run out there about 10 miles, and we found 2 of them dead from hand grenades. They had taken, I suppose, our own hand grenades, because they kicked a box of them off here and there, and everybody stuffed their pockets with them, you know, as we went. And the amphibious tractors would bring that stuff in and kick them off, and they'd maybe 1 or 2 taken out of a box, and the rest were there. So any people that infiltrated did it at night, of course, but they could have gotten our own. And anyway, these people in this remote telephone station there, 2 out of 3 were killed, and the 3rd one was the one that plugged it in and hollered, and then he got out of there. And what had happened is his rifle had failed to go off. Evidently it wasn't cleaned or something, you know. They had so many things going. Must have had sand or something in there. But he had one come to the front. There was 2 tents ahead, and he was sleeping. And he went, and it was where the operation was going on at night, where they threw the first grenades. And he had this one invader there, and the thing that just clicked, it didn't go off. Well, of course, he panicked too, because the guy was throwing grenades, and there was a cave nearby, and he ran in there trying to get this rifle to work, you know. And but first he called, and
it took a lot of courage when your weapon wasn't working.
Yeah, he was a nervous wreck when we got there with the help, you know. But
he was lucky there weren't any Japanese in the cave.
Well, yeah, see, they like to operate at night because they couldn't move in the daytime. We can get away with that.
So how did the war affect you overall?
In what way?
Yeah, well, I mean, did it change your life? I mean, your perspective of the world, you know, I mean, you're a young kid when you go over there and you come back, and how did it affect you that way?
Well, it's an experience like most of us agreed you wouldn't give a nickel to do again, but you wouldn't take $1 million for it. And it's certainly, you certainly grow up in a hurry. We had a lot of them that lied their age to get in. They were 16 years old, and just remarkable, some of them, how talented they were and how they adapted. But it's something that, well, I figure everything since is a direct result of the exposure I had then. And
really?
So,
how so? What were some of the connections, you think?
Well, I don't know. It just seemed, I've participated in so many things locally since, and it seems like you learn to work with a group, you learn to be a good listener, and you learn to separate the wheat from the chaff. And, you know, those are the basics. And then you just learn about people, all kinds of people. We had them come in from New York State, and I thought, boy, these guys are far out, you know. But New York City produces a little different person than Charlevoix.
Yeah.
But they had, I got a kick out of them. They had a lot going for them. But I'm sure that they felt the same way about, you know, some of us from up in the sticks here.
Right.
We had one fella in my outfit that he would sit down and draw, no matter what, a sketch, and it looked almost like a photograph and better. It brought out details, so. And I said, where did you learn to do that? Oh, he said, I took a class in high school. And I said, we didn't teach that in our high school, you know. And we had, of course, you don't go in the Marine Corps, you don't go out of recruit depot unless you can swim. One of the things they insisted on, and it's amazing how many could not swim. Well, for those of us raised in Charlevoix, we were down here by the pier and on the beach in our younger years, and it just came natural. And but for those that were raised in New York City, where they had a swimming pool, you had to swim the length of the pool and back. That was your qualification. And do it reasonably well, you know, and not tire or anything. But for those people, down and back was in nothing flat, you know. And so they had done that before. And but for us, to me, it was a case of how long can they stay up, you know, 2 hours, 3 hours? And I could do the dog paddle down and back all day, see? But yeah, and so everybody brought something different, you know. And it's amazing how many could not swim. They went over 2 or 3 nights before they had a fear of water. Most of them, that's what the problem was. And, you know, and that's exactly why they insisted you learn how. They wanted to make sure you had the confidence in case you ever were called on to swim.
How did you make the adjustment back to civilian life? What were the things that you used to help you make that adjustment?
Well, for one thing, I got interested in the fur business, and China had a lot of international fur trade, and I talked with people there, you know, that were in that business, and I had received. When I was in the service, I took a correspondence course from University of Nebraska in animal husbandry. And well, I never completed all of that because of obvious reasons. And I still got very interested in it, and then I started following up on the mink business. Was going pretty well during the war. And so when I got out, I decided I would go into the fur farm mink business. And I started in with a bunch of animals, and joined a group in Traverse City who had storage the size of this room, freezers. And we would buy semis full of food that had to be frozen, you know, fish, tulang livers from the meat packing industry, and meats, you know, horse meats. And they use a lot of byproducts from the Chicago slaughterhouses there. And so I got into that, and that went fairly well for a few years, and then something happened to the fur business, and it just, they had, Michigan State College had an experimental center, and I would go down there and get reports from there, and we followed it quite. I think they had 2,500 animals there at one time, and college was running this. And so I got into that, but then just before, the supply of the main part of the diet, which was horse meat, and the ranchers out west could raise 2 heads of cattle for every horse that was out there, and they were wanting to get rid of them because they were multiplying, and so they did. And eventually it got down to where there were 6 years' supply left.
Wow.
And sure enough, each year they had a more difficult time. And well, around here there was people that had obtained tractors and they no longer needed horses, and so I had no problem. But that was coming to an end too, because the tractors didn't produce more horses. So I decided I would get out, and you know, I got out at just exactly the right time. And in the meantime, we took over the neighborhood grocery store, and my wife and I, and we had 3 daughters, and I got interested in city business. So someone talked me into running for the city council, and at that time we had a wonderful old fellow there that was manager, and it was under a different system. It was the old 4th Class City Act, and that's a different system than you have today. And he was finishing up his career with 3 or 4 years left for retirement, and I was fortunate enough to have him as manager, and everybody really enjoyed him. We started the industrial park out on Taylor Avenue, and I remember he said, if you buy me a transit, I'll shoot that, and we'll do the roads this summer with some of the summer people that we hire to mow grass and so forth. We'll do that, we'll clear there were small trees and things had to come out. We'll clear that area, and the city grader will grade it, and we'll start a road there. This man's name was Taylor.
So that's why we have Taylor Road.
And that's why he said, now if you tell me what sign you want me to put up, I'll order one. And I looked at the rest of them and winked and said, well, Taylor Road, of course. I said, we bought you the transit and you took it from there. Yeah.
Is there anything more about your war experience you want to add that you can think of?
Oh,
Or have we pretty well covered it?
I think we've covered most of it, yeah. Okay. It's hard to summarize 3 years and 5 days into an hour, and keep thinking of all the interesting things that happened and some not so interesting. But it's all a part of the big picture, I guess, and I'm just feel so fortunate to be here. You know, afterward, the state had some reserve funds or something and said all veterans deserve a bonus, and there was a bonus paid to those that served. And I thought, well, when I came back, that was my bonus, you know.
Yeah, the fact that you were here.
Because a lot of us didn't. Yeah.
So you've lived in Charlevoix the whole time?
Yes, I've spent my life here, and with the exception of what I mentioned, and
Right.
during the war, well, when I graduated, the war wasn't on. It was the spring of '41. So I got into this apprentice program because that was the thing to do. either that or other college things. And we went to school in the evening and worked. We could work 11 and a half hours if we wanted to.
And you mentioned you were an apprentice in Ann Arbor.
In Ann Arbor.
And what was the apprenticeship for? What job?
Well, it was for machinist work,
Machinist.
see, and it was supposedly set up for a 4-year program, and it was just fine. But I found out when I went to Packard's to apply there that they didn't believe a 20-year-old person that had done all these things. They didn't seem to be aware of the program stated that you could only be 6 weeks on one job, and they had a coordinator that made sure that happened, and with very little exception. And so you got just got worth something to them on that job, and you had to be moved. And then we had to go to school nights twice a week, and so we took related things there, and that was a nice program, and it's always been very useful to me because later I got into refrigeration and air conditioning, and along with that I had the advantage of machinist.
So what's your earliest memory of Charlevoix?
Well, my earliest memory is when we moved from Petoskey Avenue. I was 7 years old. And prior to that, my sisters had dragged me down from Petoskey Avenue to the skating rink, which was on this block property here. And I'd clamp on some skates. They clamped to your boots, and learned to skate there. And then kindergarten. But after that, I was in the valley here, 2 blocks away, and my folks took milk from a dairy out in the country, and the fellow's name was Giles, Joe Giles, and he did the entire operation. And so in order to do the entire operation, he didn't get here till pretty near noon, And in the winter, I remember he had a sleigh and horses. In the summer, he had a Model T truck-like thing. And so after we'd been in the grocery business, everybody got milk delivered, but people would not have enough, and so we got to handling some milk. People, neighborhood store, that's what you are. You take care of the unexpected. And they would ask, and Mother would order extra milk, and so pretty soon we just had a shelf for it there, and ice, of course, at first. And so anyway, after a couple of years, this milkman said to my dad, "I've got just the thing for this lad," and he says, "I can't let you have him in the summer because he helps me bring in the cattle." And but he said in the winter they're in the barn all winter anyway. And he said, "Make a nice sleigh dog for that lad." So Bozo and I got acquainted, and I had my dad fixed up Phil's little wooden things attached to the harness so the sleigh wouldn't run up on him. And I was the only one in town that had Phil's, but a number of kids had sleigh dogs. And one year they had the winter sports, and among them was the dog race. And I got a bronze medal for first place, and Bozo loved to pull me around on that.
What kind of dog was Bozo?
He was a mixture of collie and shepherd.
Okay.
And I remember he had a big tail curled like that. And when he would get going and prance, that tail would come up, and he'd just prancing along, and that's what happened in the race. He got alongside of the one that was out ahead. All the rest of them got tangled up, and it was a mess. But I had these fills on so they didn't get tangled up, and he could run. And so when I got going, he quickly caught up to the other one, and the other one was just trotting along, but out ahead of all the rest. And we got about 2 blocks down through the main street. The race was from the foot of the hill to the bridge. And we got just about the second block. And I said, hey, this isn't going anywhere. You know, they're barking and they're prancing. And so then I remembered, if you reach out and touch his tail, he'll
take that.
and I reached out and touched that tail, and the tail straightened out and his ears went back, and we were in the bridge in no time.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and I got a little bronze medal with that.
Were the winters quite a bit harsher then?
Yeah.
A lot more snow, huh?
Yeah, that was fun. And also we had ice all the way across Lake Michigan, and my dad loved to go out and fish with some of the neighbors for a few hours. And one day they went out there, it was frozen all the way across. That's something you don't do when there's open water, especially if the wind is offshore. You take a ride. But anyway, they went out there, and so about noon, I thought, I'm going out to see what they're doing, how many fish they've got and so forth. And they were way out there. They had to be a couple of miles.
Wow.
And what had happened is ice, as it froze, would break off in a storm and pile up, and they couldn't cut a hole through it with their spud. So they had to go out until they got new ice, and then they could fish. And they had, I don't know what the official name, we called them lawyers, but they're kind of a snaky fish. And that's all they could catch out there. And they had them all over the ice, and they'd chop them up with the axe. And the seagulls, you could walk right up to the seagulls. They were so full of fish they couldn't fly. And but Bozo and I went out there, maybe 2 miles, and to see how they were doing, and then turned around and come back.
Wow.
Just enough snow on the ice so it was good going, you know.
Yeah.
And the sun was shining bright, beautiful day. All you had to do was get around the icebergs, not step and get your foot wet, you know, there. There's always open water around those icebergs. But, yeah, those are the days.
We certainly don't have ice like that anymore.
No, we don't. It's rare. But, you know, they had weather. Dad would tell about it, and he was born in 1876. And he lived to almost 94. So they had weather over his period of time that varied a great deal, too.
Did it?
One year, he said, all of Loeb's orchard, well, Loeb out here, the castle now, had a lot of property, and they had orchards.
Yeah.
And they put the apples in root cellars during the winter, and it froze in the root cellars and froze the apples. They couldn't keep them from freezing. He said it was way below zero for about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then I can remember when the snowplow was, the banks were 2/3 the height of this ceiling, you know, where they drift and stuff. And a friend of mine's dad was on the county snowplow route, and they would get stuck in that and have to bring another one. And yeah.
Got somebody trying to dig somebody else out always, it seems, in a situation like that.
Yeah. The weather changes, but then you have some of the other kind too. We've always had climate changes for 3,000 years, I understand. And they can tell by the geological things that's happened.
Right.
Oh.
So
And being in being in the refrigeration business, I've followed these chemicals. I've had to follow the chemicals, and I have to have a license from the federal government too to handle them. And so I followed that quite. It's interesting, but it is not an exact science. It's speculation all the way.